Welcome everybody out to our Game of the Month discussion. This month we are talking about the one, the only, the legendary Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. But joining us today we have the awesome SirLolz and the undisputed awesome SMWiz. Well, I guess they're both undisputedly awesome. Like, let's not try to give one more favoritism than the other because they're both fantastic people that you should check out. But anyway, Zachary, lead us off. Link to the Past. What do you think, man?
I think it's pretty swell. It's a great 90s action adventure, and it actually has some really good open world, I think, in a nutshell.
All right. And you were saying this is the first time you've ever played this game, correct?
Yes, this is the first time I've ever actually played it. I've known about it forever, but as much as I love Zelda games, I always get distracted before I go too far into them. Though, oddly enough, with this one, I never even started it. So, yeah, this was completely blind for me. I don't watch Let's Play. I never watched Let's Plays or speed runs of it. So, a lot of this was the first time I've ever seen it.
Oh, fascinating. But now that you have played it, you will need to go watch a speed run of it because it's absolutely absurd.
Yeah, or like one of those randomizers.
Oh, yeah. The one that combines with Super Metroid is fantastic, by the way. But Wiz, what about you? What is your history with Link to the Past?
I got introduced to this game in the absolute weirdest way possible, because when the first time I played Link to the Past was on the internet in the 90s. For a brief period, if you went to, I don't remember what the exact site was, it might have just been legendofzelda.com, like in browser with just your keyboard, you could play a couple tiles of the game, like around Link's house, and like go to the castle, and then it would like end,
That's very interesting.
Like I didn't really know what it was I was playing, and that was actually my first Legend of Zelda game. I came to find out later when I realized what this was.
Oh, fascinating.
But the first time I played the game proper was the Game Boy Advance release.
Oh, yeah.
And then later in college, I played the Super Nintendo version.
Very cool. So I have I don't know if I'd say it's interesting, but and fascinating history with the game as well. So I was really diehard into my N64 from 96 to 2001, obviously. So Ocarina of Time coming out, everyone made a big deal about it. So I'd never played. Okay, I played Zelda 1 and Zelda 2 maybe a little bit because my friends had them. But like it wasn't ever a franchise I knew a lot about. And so everyone was like hyping up this game. And so I finally picked it up maybe 1999-ish. It wasn't the year it came out. It was a little bit after. And played through it and just absolutely loved it. And was super like into it. Like, oh man, I love Zelda. I want to play more Zelda games. And so it's high school and my buddy's like, you said you like Zelda? Have you ever tried the Super Nintendo one? I was like, there was one on the Super Nintendo? No, I didn't. He's like, here, I'll let you borrow it. And so he just lets me borrow it. And it was like 2002. I'm just playing through it. And I'm like, wow, this is really cool. And I never beat it on the Super Nintendo cart until years later. So I ended up picking up the GBA version. And this is the one that I finally did beat the entire game on, was the GBA cart.
Nice.
And so, yeah, very interesting. Never played this one back when it was first released in like 93-ish was when it came out. I actually beat Link's Awakening before Link to the Past, of all things. But yeah, I think it's a fun Zelda game, and obviously it kind of set the tone that Zelda would run off of for 20 plus years. Like, it wasn't until Breath of the Wild that they stopped using this exact formula for every single game. So
yeah,
I think that longevity of that formula is pretty dang interesting.
it is funny though. So much context, because I played, what was it, the one on 3DS? Where like you go into the painting. Yeah.
Link Between, yeah.
So it's kind of like, I'm playing this like, this is so familiar. And then like and then I got to the portal where you become the rabbit, which I find hysterical because, the vendor in A Link Between Worlds or whatever is a rabbit. So it's like, I see what you did there, Nintendo.
Yeah, Link Between Worlds was a cool direct sequel many years after the fact.
Yeah.
So, so Link's Awakening, a little bit more linear despite its more traditional Zelda 1 open world-ish design, because you had to go through and do things in a sequence to get past different things, obviously. And that wasn't the case in Link Between Worlds, so I'm sure that was a pretty interesting once you kind of like realized the map was kind of one-to-one.
Yeah. Yeah, it was definitely more linear, but I don't think it's too linear. I think it strikes a good balance because there's different places you can go and explore and yada yada, you know. Those thieves guys though, screw those guys. Those guys are butts.
The guy that was the biggest butt in that game was a guy in Kakariko who calls the guards on you. Like, what a jerk.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I actually he's the one that runs away as soon as you get on screen, right?
Yeah, I think so. I don't quite remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, I finally used the Pegasus boots to catch up to him, and he's like, "Oh wow, if you're this fast, capturing Zelda must have been a breeze." I was like, "Listen here, punk." Yeah.
All right.
All right. Yeah, a lot of good. Getting back on topic. It's very interesting how quickly Nintendo really kind of solidified good game development. Not that there haven't been good games up to this point, but when you consider the system before it was the NES and how limited and frankly bad some games could be, especially on the home console, the fact that the next console afterwards not only looked that good, but was relatively well planned, well thought out, and well executed. You know, it's you know, it's might be something we take for granted now, but you know, back then games were just kind of sometimes thrown together.
Yep.
And I guess that's still the case, but it's just it baffles me. But yeah, it's buttery smooth considering the time frame, you know.
Yeah. It's a very well performing game, that's for sure. From a technical standpoint, like, it's super impressive. Because it has a really well drawn overworld. The map, it has a wonderful Mode 7 implementation. And again, it does run very smooth, and the sprites look good. It's all there's a lot of frames of animation, which I think is fantastic in it. And just a lot of variety overall in terms of power-ups and different things like that. So like it's definitely one of my top Zelda games. It's not my top. I'll just say that right off the top. It's not my top Zelda game, but it's definitely up there. But
it's got a pretty massive inventory selection too, when you consider, relative to the previous games and just games of that era. Talking about the wide range of items. And it made exploring that world really interesting. I mean, there's a certain level of, the game being linear, but there's also a lot of get a new item and start remembering where are all the places where there were rocks to pick up? Where were all the places there were pegs to hammer? Where were all the places there was a post that I could hook shot to, So that was a really cool, implementation for that, that we kind of take for granted with some other Legend of Zelda games later in the line.
Yeah, but this really did, like you mentioned, it set the formula for 20 plus years,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you get the 3 pendants, then you rescue the maidens, and I mean, that's the same formula that went into Ocarina of Time. You get the 3 pendants, then you go and do the sages. Majora's Mask did a little bit differently, obviously, because it was just this rush job of insanity that turned into like this incredible game. But going back into Wind Waker, you get the 3 things, then you go after the Triforce. Twilight Princess, you get the 3 areas unlocked, and then you go and do the other stuff. I don't remember a lot about Twilight Princess, sorry. Yeah. It's not one of my favorites, so I don't really replay it a lot. And then, of course, Skyward Sword is slightly different because they were starting to experiment with some of the stuff that we would later see in Breath of the Wild, but it still holds that basic overall 3 dungeons followed by a repeat of different areas dungeons type of a deal. So And then, of course, all the handheld games mostly follow the same traditional format as well. And yeah, like there were some variations to it, like Link Between Worlds obviously had the more open world design to it, but like everything that people would consider the Zelda formula was really cemented with this game in my mind. Like the original Zelda had this aspect, obviously, but I wouldn't say it was cemented in because Link, Adventures of Link obviously shifted things dramatically in terms of playstyle, but the whole dungeon system was obviously pretty similar. But yeah, this is definitely the formula for modern Zelda. So I don't know. I think that's pretty cool, and I think it's cool that it lasted as long as it did. I know I kind of got burned out on it a little bit personally, which is why I really dove into Breath of the Wild, but I still, like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it really applied to this franchise, which I think is just absolutely phenomenal. And I mean, it is still a ton of fun to go back and play Link's Awakening, or not Link's Awakening, Link to the Past. Link's Awakening is one of my favorites on Game Boy. I'm sorry, I love that game. But like anybody can plug this game in on real hardware, Game Boy Advance, Super Nintendo, or in the Switch Online apps, Wii U Virtual Consoles, and like it is still a very approachable game, and you'll understand what you need to do and where you're going if you've played any Zelda in the last 15, 20 years. Because this is the game that cemented that formula.
Yeah, it's really good at pointing you in the direction you need to go. You know, again, something else that games from that time struggled with, you know, talk to NPCs, look at your map, you more or less know where you need to go. And
shout out to that map having little pendants of everywhere where you need to go, even though it doesn't directly tell you how to get to it.
Yeah, which is how it should be done.
Yep.
You're not a gamer if you can't find your way. I'm sorry. Not sorry. Yeah.
At least this one had the decency not to hide a dungeon under a random bush that you had to burn in the middle of a forest that was exactly like all the other bushes. Looking at you, Zelda 1.
I'm sorry. I'm going to draw a lot of hate right now. Like, I don't like playing Zelda 1. Like, you guys remember when I streamed it a couple years ago? Like, I did not enjoy it. That's the first time I ever finally beat that game. And I was like, I did not enjoy this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's kind of what ties into my first point was the whole, like, the SNES really was more than just a new console. It really did improve a lot on the user experience. You know, because, like, another franchise like Super Metroid versus Metroid, you know,
boy,
Metroid might have been the one to start it off, but I'm sorry, that game is pure pain. I am not playing that.
Just maps. Maps make such the biggest difference in the world.
Yeah.
Maps.
Yeah. So yeah, that's just kind of part of what really impressed me was just the huge gap in quality control between NES and SNES.
You know, you mentioned the user experience and quality of life, and I mean, there's a ton to be had and enjoyed in Link to the Past. I will say there's one piece that I think Nintendo dropped the ball on, and I love that the modding community has fixed it, and Ice might know where I'm going with this, but
let's hear it.
You don't really use the L and R buttons for anything in this game. You use it a little bit on the map screen, and that's literally it. You know, and I understand it's a new console and, you know, you don't necessarily know what you want to do with all these buttons or whatever, but the modding community was very quick to be like, well, that's obviously quick cycle between items, you know, cycle left or cycle right.
Oh, yeah.
That's the one thing, like, going through and playing this again, like, I was just like, I didn't even think about it. I hit L and R. I played Mega Man X so much, I'm like, well, obviously I'm going to hit L and R to cycle through my items. It does nothing, you know?
That is a missed opportunity.
I didn't even know that mod existed, to be honest.
Oh yeah, so it's like
look into it.
You can go patch your ROM if you're, you know, playing that way, and so it's like you can have quick swap enabled.
Yeah.
That does make a lot of sense.
Yep. No,
but I mean,
that's actually really good quality of life improvement while speaking.
Yeah. But I mean, but I think it also speaks to how good the game is that if you're going to talk bad about it, that's the nitpick that comes to mind is, oh, I wish L and R were better utilized.
Yeah.
Which is funny because that's the exact same nitpick for Super Metroid.
Yeah.
But you don't like pumping your arm up and down?
See, I like how the Game Boy Advance games implemented it. You do it for one, and then you could just press up and down. Like, that was great. But having to press select to cycle between your weapons in Super Metroid was my only nitpick for it when I did my retro review on it 5-6 years ago. So, yeah, I mean, having that be mapped to L or R for cycling the weapons instead of select, like having to go over to select is such a headache by comparison. So, I mean, I understand completely what you're saying about cycling the weapons.
Yeah, especially, and it doesn't happen too often, but just every once in a while where you're in these scenarios where you're having to swap between two weapons quickly. It's kind of annoying, like, to be interrupting your boss fight to open up the menu instead of just being able to hit a shoulder button.
Yeah, and I mean, that's kind of a Zelda franchise problem in general. I mean, remember the water temple in Ocarina? Unequip boots, re-equip boots.
Yeah.
3DS
Water
version
temple
for
in
the
Ocarina.
win.
Yep.
Yeah. I definitely don't like that there's only like one item button to map.
Yeah.
Like, good Lord. I remember Wind Waker HD just being able to, do whatever I want with those buttons, and they just did it.
Yeah. And I mean,
but like you said, though, that's the
growing.
only. Yeah. But like you said, though, Wiz, if that's the only complaint, there's not a lot of negative to say about it.
No, not really. Like, I'm trying to really think of my negatives about it, and I mean, I can't. There's nothing that really comes to mind in outright criticism. Like, there's the quality of life stuff, but I mean, the story itself is top notch, well delivered. I think the pacing is pretty good. World traversal isn't necessarily my favorite thing, but that's more of a personal preference more than a problem with the game. Some puzzles aren't super clearly defined, but it's done well enough that you can like just kind of experiment and stumble onto the answer most of the time. Like, I beat these games without a walkthrough, so I'm proud of myself for that, because I'm one that if I get stumped on something for a little while, I'll just be like, screw it. I don't have time to really sit around and wait for it, so I'll just look it up. And I mean, even as a teenager kid, when I couldn't figure it out right away, I was like, I don't have time for this. Let me get on AOL and spend half an hour waiting for the webpage to load.
I think
like I have strat guides for most of my games for that very reason. Like, I would always buy the strat guide when I bought a new game, because it's like, I'll try to figure it out. If I get stuck, I don't care. So
yeah,
I beat these without a strat guide, so that was always a happy moment for me. It's like, I figured this one out by myself. Let's go.
Heck yeah. Yeah. In that same, the only thing that I don't really like, but I can't fault the game for it, it's just something the franchise does. I don't like invisible walls that you're just supposed to bomb for no reason.
See, but this game actually made that a lot more. Like, this game made that a lot more defined. Like, you had actual bomb walls, unlike original Zelda, where it was literally the same tile in a sea of the same tile. And then, like, you poke your sword at it, and it would make the different sound. So, like, I appreciate greatly those quality of life improvements.
I don't know if I told you that, if you knew that, because that was that a hint stone you found in the first temple or dungeon, or was that something an NPC told you? Because somebody somewhere in that game tells you about bonking your sword on the wall.
It's within the first 20 minutes of the game. I don't remember if it was one of the wall hints or an NPC, but it is told to you at least within the first 20 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, well, so you hold your sword in the charge position. You can walk around. You can bop the wall, and it'll do like thunk, 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 and then when you hit a bumble section, it goes higher pitched, like a tink.
It's like dink. Okay. So it's
fair enough, I guess.
It's kind of like people that complain about having to use bombs in Metroid. It's like, it's just it's expected of you, so you kind of just have to get into the mindset to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, the only thing, some of the hitboxes feel a little wonky.
Yeah.
But
shielded enemies especially.
Yeah, I was gonna say, the shielded knights were a little annoying.
Yeah. There's fun ways to cheese them, though, which are pretty fun.
Oh, yeah. You watch the speedrunners, and you're like, man, I'm garbage at this game.
Well, see, I
Yeah.
accepted that I'm garbage at every game a long time ago, and that's why I claim to only be good at 2 games, Mega Man X and Rogue Squadron 1. I might throw Rogue Squadron 2 into that finally, so, we'll say I'm good at 3 games.
Yeah. I think also like arrows. Like I know aim assist. Like I wouldn't want aim assist in there necessarily, but sometimes it felt like the arrow just missed. Like come on, just hit, just go.
It was off by 1 pixel. Suck it.
Yeah, yeah. That's what it was. Yeah.
Oh man. But yeah, so like there's no real critiques again that I could levy at this game other than personal preference things and then just a couple of quality of life things. And I think that just shows how this game has stood as one of the top 100 games, and it's usually always included in the top 100 games lists of all these sites and major outlets and stuff like that. Even with recency bias, like Super Metroid and Link to the Past always seem to sneak into the top 10. Like, no issue.
Before Breath of the Wild, when you talk to like lifelong Zelda fans, they usually cite either this one or Ocarina of Time as their favorite. Like that was for a long time. Those were the two. Like you picked one or the other, and that was your favorite in the series.
Yep. Final Fantasy 6 or 7.
So I mean, like it just speaks to like how this game has just like stood the test of time.
Yep.
And like you were saying earlier, is that you could pick this game up now today, and it still feels smooth. It plays clean. Like it's not clunky or cumbersome. Like you don't have a difficult learning curve as far as like the controls or the general game mechanics go.
Yeah, it looks exactly like all those not copycat games, but all those games that are doing that pixel style. It's like this is where it started. It really is.
And that's one of the things that makes it fit in so well today, like makes it so approachable even today, is that there's been such a renaissance in the pixel art style and all that you could just pop in Link to the Past for a lot of people and be like, oh yeah, that's cool, let's do it, because it has enough of what people would expect from this type of game to not be brutal. And I mean, you're missing out on widescreen presentation with a default Super Nintendo card. The Game Boy Advance card gives you a bit more widescreen of a presentation, but of course mods, emulation, and different things like that can give you a true 16:9 experience on it. It's actually pretty fascinating to see. Also, speaking of mods, using an MSU1 audio pack in the game to get the orchestrated version of the soundtrack. Like the soundtrack, the MIDI soundtrack is probably second to none as far as Super Nintendo soundtracks go. Like it's so fantastic. Good. It's beautiful. But then you put the orchestrated version on top of it, and it's just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
This is glorious. So yeah, I love playing through this game with MSU1 audio. Like it just blows me away. It feels like a different experience. Just like, again, the audio itself was already top notch, but it's just like, we're just going to take it from a 10 to an 11 here. Like, oh my gosh. Like,
it's definitely on a pedestal that can't be challenged, because even if there's another game that you might like more, there's nothing you can say wrong about this one, because it set so many of the trends that came after it.
The music and the sound work is just so phenomenal. Like, there isn't a single thing out of place as far as the sound work goes in my mind. Like even Link's little falling sound, this is like hilarious to me. So that's one thing where I'm gonna ding the GBA version. I hated that it gave it the Link screaming for the fall. It's like, no, I want the instead of the sound. The sound is unfortunately a lot more degraded on the Game Boy Advance version just because of the GBA sound chip versus the Super Nintendo one. But I mean, it does well enough that it's still pretty up there. But if you have a choice, I'd definitely say go for the original Super Nintendo version, hands down, every time.
Yeah. And, you can get it on your Switch. I was actually able to play it not just on my Switch, but with my Retrobit controller.
Oh, nice. You got the Legacy 16 popping that one off. Nice.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, finally got to use it, I would say. So, yeah, nice.
And then the Legacy GC even, because we just did the review for that one. So let's go.
Oh yeah. I need to watch
Nice.
that. I need to get me one of those. But yeah, yeah, this one's a little weird because like other games that we've talked about, like Mario Kart or Star Fox, I've had very strong opinions. But this one, I just like, like, yeah, it's good. Like I never played it before, so I can't really like, yeah, it's fun. It's good. Collision could be better, but that's more so just an artifact of the time. You know, like everything else, story wise, gameplay wise, it knocked it out of the park.
Did you finish it all the way, or are you still working through it?
I'm still working through it.
Okay.
So
Nah, I don't want to spoil anything because obviously we try to keep these spoiler free for anybody who might have not been able to experience the glory that it is for the last 30 years. But
yeah.
No, I think the storyline in this one is just, again, top notch. So I'm really glad that you're getting to experience it. Like, I get excited about that. Like, it's like sharing good games is its own reward. And that's one of the great things about Game of the Month right now.
I love how cheeky some of the NPCs are. Like, some of those guys are just something else. And I'm sure there's a answer to it. I just haven't gotten to it yet. I think I might have an idea, but I'm not going to say anything. Like the guy that just has a sign next to him, and he just stares at you. Like, okay.
Yo.
Yeah, it's fun. Okay, so it's good for me to know that you didn't finish the game because I almost ruined that one earlier when Ice was talking about how like you don't need a guide and it's just intuitive. And I was like, I gotta say, when I was playing through that again, that signpost guy, I was like sitting there, I was like, what do I do with this thing again? It's like that one was rough. Like that one did not feel like it held your hand for that puzzle.
But it's
So
one
it's
that you can stumble upon by accident.
Yeah. Like,
I think I have a lead, but I'm not gonna, something else really.
A certain clearing of animals and that
don't
confused
spoil
me a little bit.
Yeah.
The other something that was cheeky, like when you get the master sword, and there's that bandit's lair, and he's like, for 30 rupees, I'll let you have whatever's in the chest you choose. And I'm playing on the Switch version, so I have the rewind. So I open the first chest, it's 1 rupee. So it's like, all right. So I rewind, open the second chest, it's 1 rupee. Rewind, open the third chest, it's 1 rupee. It's like, I can't even be mad. What was I thinking? This guy's a thief.
He's a thief. Yeah.
I can't even be mad. That one's on me. So
got him.
Yeah. Oh no, I just rewound
scammed me.
Yeah. So I just rewound one more time before I started the conversation and just walked out. I was like, nope, I'm not.
Yeah. I loved all the decoy master swords too, just since you already mentioned that part. Just well done. Well done. Finding the real one took me forever.
Yeah.
But it was so rewarding.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. See, that's what was funny, because again, Ocarina of Time didn't have the magic sword, so it didn't have the thing that would shoot out. And so playing Zelda 2 and Zelda 1, the little that I had, like that's what I expected out of the sword since you first got it. And then like you didn't have it, I was like, oh, what? And then you get Master Sword, I was like, there it is. Oh, yay.
Yay. Yeah. So yeah, sorry, go for it.
No, I was gonna say, we've talked a bit about the items and everything, and I was like, I'd be curious to hear your guys' thoughts on the boss battles in this game.
Oh,
because
so
much. I think one of the things that's really cool about this is just how unique each one of them feels. They're each their own little experience, I think.
Yeah.
I love the artwork for each and every one of them too. And again, speaking of just the generational gap between the NES games and this one, just how large they all were too. Like, like you fight the bosses in Zelda 1, they're just a couple of tiles because they can't do anything more than that with what they were doing. And then you get into this one, it's just like woo, room spanning sizes for a lot of them. It's
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, let's go. Like,
Yeah.
it was glorious.
Yeah. Boss of Turtle Rock takes up half the room.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the one
I
with
think-
the hammer mask, right?
Don't spoil it. He may not be that far.
That's
we
true.
gotta ask how
the
far.
last thing I did was get the Master Sword, so that's
Okay.
where I'm at
Okay.
right now.
Uh,
Yeah.
I'll-
The bosses I've faced so far are easy. I think they could have been a little more challenging, though I get the feeling that's going to change.
Well, I mean, it is Nintendo and it is Zelda, so it's not overly complicated to figure out and beat most bosses. And I mean, it's just that typical Nintendo pattern where you usually only have to hit them 3 times before you win. 3-4 times, like,
Yeah.
unless
Yeah.
it's Mulderm,
yeah, that's,
least favorite fight in the game.
that's true. That's true.
As for the moth is another one, and I'm forgetting his actual name right now, but that gives some people troubles.
Yeah. I don't know.
Anyways, can't get into that too much without
No,
spoiling
keep it
things.
spoiler
'Cause
free here.
each, like I said, each fight is its own little puzzle. But I mean, there are a lot of different common enemies in the game, and the bosses all feel really unique, and
Yeah.
that's not to bag on any of the later games, but how many bosses can we get where it's shoot them in the eye and then run up and stab them in the eye? It's nice to have something that's a little bit different.
Here's looking
Yeah.
at you, Ocarina. It's true though. No, it's a valid thing. Like, I'm a big fan of 3D gaming. Like, I was since its inception. Like, I jumped on 3D wholeheartedly. But it's so true for those early 3D games. Just like, there's low variety, low world density. Like, it was just the transition. But yeah. Like, this is definitely some of peak 2D gaming in my mind.
Yeah. I agree.
So, yeah, I don't really have a whole lot to say about this one this time around, other than just I think it is a well-earned classic that people should experience if they haven't already. It is still readily available in a number of different formats for anyone wanting to experience it. Obviously, the easiest being Nintendo Switch Online's SNES app. It's one of the included games. And I believe it had an SP mode as well. Did it? I don't remember. But there might be an SP mode to give you like extra items and stuff to help you get through the game. I don't remember.
I think that might have been the NES one, just Zelda 1.
okay.
But
either way, it's not too difficult.
I'd have to
get
look it
through.
up too. I'd have to open it to check, but yeah.
Then, of course, it's still readily available in cartridge format on Super Nintendo. You can get a Japanese version for like $10, and then the US version's going for about 40-ish now, I think. And then, of course, the Game Boy Advance version is also available. That one is a bit more, I think, I can't remember if it's going for like 25 or 35 right now. So still pretty readily available, not overly priced, just to get loose carts. But yeah, it's definitely worth picking up if you haven't experienced it. You're a fan of that formula, that franchise. And if you haven't played it, definitely worth picking up and trying it out. Because, again, graphics, music, gameplay, it's all pretty top tier. Nothing really to criticize us in terms of its design, other than a couple of quality of life things that could have been implemented better if it had been designed in the current generation.
Yeah.
So something we too ought to touch on, though, lest we be roasted in the comments.
Oh, let's hear it.
But the absolutely amazing modern community in this game, both like the speed runs and the randomizers and the cross-world runs, like talk about a game with staying power. And like seriously, speed runs this, and there's so many categories because you can do glitchless, you can do no major glitches, you can do hybrid glitches, you can do overworld glitches, and then you get into the randomizers that have all their glory and insanity, like key sanity, shuffling keys between dungeons and stuff.
Oh no.
It's absolutely fascinating to watch and to see, people who've poured so many hours in this game that it doesn't matter when you do something like that. Scatter the keys all over the world? Yeah, sure. It'll take them 30 minutes longer to beat that than if they were playing the vanilla game,
Oh my gosh. See, I would enjoy watching that type of thing. I would absolutely despise playing it.
Oh, yeah. I'm not saying it's for everyone to play, but it's fascinating to watch.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially if
It's
you can get
definitely-
someone who's explaining that, like when you do, I don't typically go for glitch runs, but Link to the Past has some interesting ones.
Oh, I
Like
love
you can
glitches.
do manipulations where you basically force yourself through a wall out of bounds. You're off screen doing data input, or directional inputs that'll pop you out somewhere else on the other side of the world. Like might even put you inside one dungeon or something. It's
That's so
fascinating stuff to
fun.
watch.
That's so fun.
Yeah.
I love
It is
Out-of-Bounds.
kind of crazy when you said like randomize the keys and stuff. Like, I'm too good at this game. I need to make it painful to make it challenging.
Yeah. See, that's
Yep.
what's funny. I watch people do this stuff, do randomizers, do all this stuff. Like, I need it just to keep the game exciting. It's like, man, okay.
So,
I mean,
yeah,
like, more
okay.
power to you, but man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, another one. They have a category, for the randomizer called Enemizer, where it's random enemies strewn throughout the whole game,
That would be
overworlds,
intense.
dungeons,
That would be
and you can
intense.
even set it so that the damage they do is randomized. So you might know, oh, this guy will hit me for a heart, but now he's going to hit you like he's a Lionel or something and knock out several hearts.
Oh, man.
No.
The,
Like I said,
the Link to
not
the
necessarily
Past.
for everyone to play, but fascinating to watch.
Yeah.
The Link to the Past Super Metroid combination runs are
Yes.
insanely odd to me. That people would even think of ways to conjoin these games and then have the different transition points that change you back and forth between them. Like,
Is that what that is?
Yes,
Yeah,
Like they're
it's
playing both
you're
Metroid
playing.
and
It's
Zelda?
a
It's
literal.
like because it
It's a
runs on
literal
the same
melding
engine.
of Link to the Past and Super Metroid, and
So
you go through certain transitions. It'll switch
yeah,
you between
so
the games.
yeah, like you'll be playing Legend of Zelda, step through a doorway, and instead of going into a house, now you're in Super Metroid, and you're controlling Samus, and you've got that inventory layout. And it's
Okay.
crazy because sometimes you'll be playing as Samus, and you'll find the hook shot, and now when you go back into the Legend of Zelda, you'll have the hook shot.
Yeah,
Things like that.
Okay.
and
Okay.
then
There's
people
also,
randomize that to make it even
randomize
more
that.
intense.
Yep.
Okay.
Then
It's absurd.
then you also have a mod called Multi-World, so you can get a friend together and you both play Legend of Zelda at the same time, but it's
Yeah.
randomized, and so your items are in different places scattered across your own game and your friend's game. So you might like not have your own bow. You have to wait for your friend to find the bow and it sends it to your game.
Oh my gosh,
Huh.
that is nuts.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
again fascinating to watch. You're
I have
playing a
not kept up
randomizer
with
where
the mods for this game. I will admit that. Like, I have not kept up with it at all. That is nuts.
it's a lot of fun to watch.
That's
Sounds
absurd.
like it. Yeah.
That is absurd. Alrighty then.
Jeez.
So anyways, but that speaks to it too. This game that it was, you said 93. I didn't double check that
92,
myself.
93, somewhere in there.
Something like that, but
Yeah.
it's still a very active community, and they're just always coming out with more stuff for it. They're always finding new ways to play this game and keep it fresh.
It's absurd.
Yeah,
man.
new
Like,
ways
it's
to hold the
Absolute
beer.
classic.
It's so cool. When I think of classic, like something that just, it's a classic. It's something that needs to be experienced by everyone. It holds a top spot. Like, I think this game definitely fulfills that easily.
Yeah.
Like, I
Yeah,
don't-
for real.
I think that term gets way overused, but in terms of Link to the Past and Super Metroid, I think that it just fits it so perfectly. Like, yeah, that is a classic. Definitely.
Yeah, agreed.
So I kind of already gave my final thoughts on this. Let's go ahead and close this one up. Keep it a bit brief this month. Zachary, leave us with your final thoughts on the game, whether or not people should definitely be checking it out or not. And we'll wrap this up, and then we'll have Wiz do the same.
Yeah. You definitely owe it to yourself to play it if you're a Zelda fan, or even just an adventure game fan in general. despite its age, it's it's aged like fine wine. There's it's just as it reaches that same bar that games today should reach. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. Like if you're up for a good Zelda game, something you haven't played, boot it up, give it a go.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, and I think, that ticks off a couple of the boxes that I had in my head too, because I was gonna say, it's like, for anyone who's a Legend of Zelda fan, I think this is an absolute must play if you haven't played it already. And, even if you haven't played Legend of Zelda, if you enjoy action games or adventure games in general, it's definitely worth checking out. And even if those aren't your, genre that you're interested in, maybe try this out anyways, because I think it's an approachable game. Some of the end game may be difficult if you don't like action adventure games, but I think you still get a lot out of playing this, and it just really holds up to the point, like, we are having a difficult time as a collective coming up with critiques for this game.
Yeah.
Very much so. Speaking of boxes, I mean, check out Wiz's backdrop over there, just showing off the goods. Oh yeah, oh yeah, look at that, just mwah.
Yeah.
Like, I got my cartridges, but I do not got pretty boxes to go along with them anymore.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Sorry, we gotta just point those out before we call it here. So I think our unanimous decision for A Link to the Past is definitely a must play. Again, you can find this one on Switch, on the Nintendo Switch Online app, SNES app, SNES, and Game Boy Advance. So nice spread of systems that is available on. If you happen to have purchased it on the Wii or Wii U and never played it, you can still do that as well, obviously, if you had purchased them before the eShops went down, of course. But it's a readily available classic, definitely a must play, and I think that's where we're just going to leave it here for all of you today. Let us know what you all think about Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past in the comments below, because this is an open show. We love to hear about everyone's thoughts on the matter. So let us know, and then we'll see you all back here next month for our next Game of the Month discussion. But Zachary, Wiz, thank you both so much for joining me today to talk about Link to the Past. Appreciate you both, as always.
Thanks for having us.
Yep. Good to be here.
All right. See you all back next month.